The next topic related to the world of women in Egypt is, of course, fragrance. The Egyptians took scents very seriously. In particular, they believed that the smell emanating from a body revealed the true essence of whoever inhabited that body. Demons and malevolent spirits gave off foul odors, while gods and divine beings exhaled the fragrance of incense or other magnificent substances. It was extremely important that scent was closely linked to the concept of breath, because breath is life. So when you see these beautiful depictions, like a lady at a banquet inhaling the aroma of a water lily flower, not lotus but nymphaea, it's on one hand a conversation about fragrance, and on the other hand, a symbol of eternal life, because the flower can breathe out its scent endlessly. Here's a rare monument again from the Metropolitan Museum. This is Yamas, the beloved sister of Senenmut, that very tutor of Princess Neferur and Vizier, and favorite of Pharaoh Hatshepsut. We know quite a lot about Egyptian perfumes, and toward the end of the lecture, I'll recommend you an outstanding book. The brilliant Swedish researcher Lisa Manish published a stunning volume dedicated entirely to Egyptian fragrances. The problem is that many recipes that have survived to our time include numerous plant ingredients, and it's not always possible to make an exact attribution. In other words, to understand precisely which herb or plant is meant. Nevertheless, Egyptian perfumery laid the foundation for the perfume traditions of the later ancient world, and then writers like Pliny the Elder and Dioscorides, outstanding authors on medicine and perfumery, describe purely Egyptian scents in detail. Look at this beautiful relief from the Louvre. Ladies are pressing oil from the petals of water lilies growing along the riverbank. Here's a specific example for you. This is the completely Egyptian fragrance called susinon, made exclusively from white lilies. And right now in front of you is the production of that very scent. I'll give you the recipe quite precisely, translated from ancient measures into kilograms, grams, and liters so everything becomes clear. What we need: 2 batches of 1,000 white river lilies, so 2,000 lilies total. Slightly more than 4 kilograms of ben oil from the moringa tree. 2 kilograms 354 grams of sweet cane, 140 grams of myrrh. Fragrant wine is needed. Approximately 1.5 kilograms, specifically 1 kilogram 530 grams, of cardamom, 270 grams of the best myrrh, 307 grams of saffron, crocus, 281 grams of cinnamon, and also honey and salt. What we have to do: first, crush the cardamom and grind it in rainwater. Pay attention, specifically rainwater. Then combine the ben oil, sweet cane, and myrrh. Place everything in the fragrant wine and bring it to a boil. After that, filter the resulting mixture through a metal, or better yet, stone, filter. Add the cardamom to it, then strain the oil again, removing any remaining particles. Hang those particles aside for some time and then let the mixture rest. Then take about 1.5 kilograms of this oil, which by now starts to thicken, and add the lilies. Naturally, from those 1,000 lilies you need to pluck the petals. Place the petals in a low vessel and pour the oil over them. Anoint your hands with the very best honey, then carefully squeeze and mix the lily petals with the oil. Leave this mixture for a full day, then strain it very thoroughly, removing any water or other liquids, the flower juice that remains, because it can cause the oil to go rancid and spoil the product. Then add another 1,000 lilies to this oil and leave it again for 24 hours. You can repeat this multiple times. The more lilies, thousands, you add, the better the fragrance will be. After that, take the best honey again, dip your hands in it, and take the vessel where the fragrance will be stored. Rub the inside of the vessel with honey, which here also acts as a preservative. Put a little salt in it, remove all unnecessary plant particles, and add back 1.5 kilograms of the fragrant oil, plus 37 grams of crushed cardamom. Rub everything thoroughly with your hands, Leave it to settle, then remove anything unnecessary. Only after that pour the oil into this vessel.
Once the fragrance is ready, filter it one more time very carefully, and only after that pour it into small vessels, before sealing them for storage or use. The necks of these vessels were filled with resin, and for extra aroma and pleasure, crushed myrrh and saffron flowers were added to the resin. This is the famous Egyptian susinon, a lily-based linear fragrance. There are separate recipes for other scents, including rice-based perfumes or those made purely from flowers. There are many recipes, and I'll tell you right away. By the turn of the new era, Egyptian fragrances in Rome were the most expensive. No other scents from the ancient world could compare to them. So when we look at depictions of Egyptian women, we don't just see luxurious wigs, garments, and jewelry. We must imagine them enveloped in the cloud of some famous, exquisite fragrance. Here's another fragment, also from the Louvre. You see ladies gathering lilies again. They turn to each other, laugh, chat, and collect these wonderful flowers. But then, in a slightly different procedure, they squeeze them in a woven bag. They press out the juice or infuse it in oil in a vessel for further perfume preparation. Besides the plant-based scents that abounded in the Nile Valley, the natural fragrances of ancient Egypt were resins. Here in front of you is myrrh, antiopa in ancient Egyptian. Myrrh was generally considered the aroma of femininity. When Egyptian love poems describe a contented wife, they say she caresses like a cat and smells of myrrh. Such world trees gave this resin. The Egyptians brought it all from tropical Africa. And here's another very popular incense, of course. Frankincense, ladanum, or true incense. Frankincense was probably the main aroma of the Egyptian temple. Not just any temple, but the purest ground resin. None of the boiled or adulterated versions known today. It was just pure resin, which you can still buy in the East, in Somalia, or other countries in that region. People made expeditions for frankincense and myrrh as far back as the 25th century BCE, even in the era of the pyramids. And this image right here is a relief on the wall of Hatshepsut's temple in Deir el-Bahari. You see the mountain, the red myrrh, and that's the resin the queen's servants scoop up from the ship, bringing this incredible wealth from the land of Punt, the blessed land, as it was sometimes called in Egyptian texts. In mythology, there was even a deity of fragrance who came from Nubia, called Dedum. He was depicted as a white, luxurious tropical bird that flew to the banks of the Nile from distant Africa. Here together, with the wings of the snow-white bird Dedum on this amazing relief, the land of God arrives at the Nile's shores. Let's look at elements of Egyptian banquets on fragments of wall paintings from various tombs of the 15th to 14th centuries BCE. They always sat on very low chairs. In general, Egyptian furniture is very low, made from noble woods. Here noble ladies and maids pour wine, and under the chairs of noble ladies you see these wonderful aromatic cones. Imagine what such a banquet chair looked like. From the tomb of Lady Hennet Neferet, who was a temple singer and mother of that very architect's son in the Metropolitan Museum. Magnificent finish here. You see the sacred symbols Djed, and here without. She also sits in the center. And of course in the banquet hall, where lamps burned, where fragrances wafted, noble ladies and gentlemen sat on such low chairs. Right there in the stands were large jugs of wine, all decorated with garlands of living water lilies and wildflowers. Everything was, of course, very, very beautiful. An obligatory element of the banquet was the so-called greeting. Fragrant water or some kind of vegetable milk poured into the palms of the guests. This tradition is superbly preserved even in modern Upper Egyptian villages. When hosts welcome their friends, they squeeze mango leaves, though mango didn't exist in Egypt back then. but similar white milky liquid, and rub it into the palms, a sign of hospitality. Here a servant is pouring some fragrant milk into the palms of her mistress, the chantress of the god Amun, Henutawi. All the names and details are written and commented on here.
And of course, there was plenty of alcohol at these banquets. Huge quantities of wine and beer. Sometimes excesses happened. Here's a drawing from one of the tombs. A lady has had too much. She's feeling ill, and a servant is supporting her by the head while holding a special vessel to catch the consequences of overindulgence. Even these unexpected human details appear in Egyptian art. Details that for many of my listeners today are wonderfully familiar. And again, we can't talk about Egyptian beauties without mentioning Khepri, or rather, Kyphi. This was one of the most famous fragrances of ancient Egypt. There were two kinds. One was burned on braziers, the other was chewed. Chewing Kyphi gave the breath a special, pleasant aroma. You know, the Egyptians paid enormous attention not only to hygiene. They had liquid soap based on palm oil and natron, but also to these chewing pills. For example, in the Temple of Isis on the island of Philae, the Kyphi recipe lists ingredients like grape, must from Edfu wine, special wine of Isis, honey, resin of frankincense and myrrh, olive and pistachio mastic, pine resin, sweet cane, camel grass, mint, cypress, henna, and pine nuts. I won't drag you through the full preparation process right now. All these ingredients were added in a special way, mixed, and formed into small astringent balls. Sometimes a little mandragora was added. As you know, mandrake contains a huge amount of alkaloids. Occasionally, ritual wines were infused with it, so there could be a subtle narcotic element. Imagine a lady's boudoir again. She could prepare her own necessary oils quite quickly. I'll quickly run through some specific monuments so you can picture not just the recipes, but how stunningly effective they were. Here are cosmetic palettes and mixing spoons, magnificent vessels for fragrances made from travertine or Egyptian alabaster. Sometimes the material was anhydrite, which had this rosy tint. On the right at the top is the famous duck-shaped vessel from around the turn of the 18th to 17th centuries BCE from the Hermitage. On the left is a duck and a baboon-shaped vessel, both containers for fragrances, also anhydrite, same period, now in the Metropolitan Museum. Again, anhydrite, which sometimes had a bluish tint. Insanely beautiful things. In the center is a tall vessel with a specific shape called a bez vessel, used only for sacred fragrances. And from this vessel's name comes the name of the goddess Bastet, literally, she of the perfume vessel. So even the goddess's name ties back to these fragrance containers. Fragrances weren't stored only in stone, but also in glass. In the Middle Kingdom, Egyptians became acquainted with core-formed glass, invented by the Phoenicians, and this colored glass became extremely popular in Egypt. They took a porous stone core of the desired shape, coated it with thick colored glass, fired it so the glass fused, then carefully removed the core from inside with metal tools. Here are different vessels. Pay attention to the one on the right that looks like a column. This is a kohl vessel for the black eye paint, kohl, that both men and women used to line their eyes. They even added extracts of beneficial herbs because this was Africa, and eye diseases were very common. Then a wooden stick, or applicator, was used to apply these cosmetic lines around the eyes. The famous Cleopatra makeup, called Mesdemet in antiquity. It came in different qualities, and people sometimes argued over whose was better. Here's a superb example of a glass fragrance vessel from the Marna collection, now in the British Museum. This tilapia fish, the fish that gives birth to the sun. And below is a set of various cosmetic vessels from the British Museum. all roughly 15th to 14th centuries BCE. Items that could have adorned any noble lady's toilet table, naturally with cosmetics. And tied to rituals of rebirth are the so-called cosmetic spoons. There are enormous numbers of them. Some have plant motifs. Others show servants carrying perfume-related elements. On the left are cosmetic spoons from the Louvre. On the right, from the Carlsberg Papyrus collection in Copenhagen, is a spoon depicting a girl carrying a huge aromatic cone. In the Louvre again is this stunning spoon with a girl carrying a vessel of fragrances, and the lid is perfectly preserved. From the Metropolitan, a travertine spoon with a gazelle, the heavenly swimmer, holding it in her hands.
Fragrances were stored and kept in large vessels. Right now, I'm showing you items from Tutankhamun's tomb, so these are a priori royal objects, but they differ from what ordinary homes used only in the degree of decoration and luxury. Here's a vessel for lily oil from the tomb. Sometimes these vessels had astonishing, elaborate constructions decorating them. On the right, 2 Nile gods hold papyrus and lily, the heraldic plants of Lower and Upper Egypt. On the left is a vessel with the names of Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun. Usually such things are associated with the queen. Howard Carter wrote that when he opened this vessel, he was struck by the deep, rich smell of the dried oil still inside. But again, we can't speak about the authenticity of that scent. The oil had long gone rancid. Yet from recipes like the one I read you earlier with lilies, we can get a close idea of how the finest fragrances of the Egyptian royal house smelled. Wine was drunk from luxurious goblets. Here's the famous cup of Nefertiti again, from the Metropolitan Museum, shaped like a white water lily made of travertine. There are huge numbers of examples in faience and gold cups too. Naturally, this immersion in what we'd call a luxury world, the world of beauty, began for an Egyptian lady in the morning. And sometimes this morning ritual, the morning of a new day, another day of life, was so important that similar scenes could appear even on a sarcophagus. In the 21st century BCE, Lady Kyphi, one of the junior wives of Pharaoh Nitocris or similar, has this morning scene on her sarcophagus. She's in a very fashionable dress with a strap across the chest, already wearing a necklace. A servant behind her is tying the side locks of her hairstyle, most likely a fashionable short wig. In one hand she holds a mirror, and with the other she drinks a cup of milk. Exactly milk, because right nearby is a cow that has just been milked to bring fresh milk to the lady. A servant in front of her pours another cup and pronounces one of the most ancient toasts in human history. "For your life force, O mistress," he says to her. Mirrors are a whole separate topic. They were linked to the symbolism of the goddess Hathor, or depicted with papyrus stems, because the papyrus stalk was a symbol of youth and eternal rebirth. A rich lady had a silver mirror, or one made from an alloy of silver and electrum. A simple girl looked into water, and the wife of a provincial scribe had a copper mirror. Here before you is the mirror of Princess Sat Hathor and her husband, 19th century BCE, Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This is, of course, the highest level of such craftsmanship, and such a mirror could be kept in a case like this, along with wigs, favorite fragrances, and other toilet items. By the way, these things weren't only for women. Men use them too. Here's a luxury item again from the Metropolitan. It belonged to a man named Rhanes Nebu, who was the palace steward under Myrrh, or similar. At least now you can imagine such a life on an Egyptian noble lady's vanity table. A little bit about jewelry. I'll just show you some typology, because this is another huge topic. Different variants of broad Usek collars. Here's one from the Middle Kingdom, 18th century BCE. Gold, turquoise, carnelian, lapis lazuli, and faience paste. Of the stones we consider precious today, the Egyptians didn't know diamonds, rubies, emeralds, or sapphires. Their sacred stones were turquoise, from Sinai mines, lapis lazuli, brought by trade caravans from Afghanistan to the Nile Valley, and amethyst, sacred, mined in the eastern desert on Egyptian territory. Continuing with the Middle Kingdom, look at these stunning ritual jewelry pieces, gold and amethyst with bead weaving, and belts of princesses, their gold elements in the form of cowrie shells with metal balls inside. Cowrie shells were one of the symbols of the goddess Hathor, and of femininity. They resemble female genitalia. When priestesses or princesses danced around the sistrum, they wore such belts. It added a beautiful musical accompaniment with the shells jingling. Another beautiful element of such belts, again cowrie shells, sacred fish, youth side locks of the god of millions of years. Everything here is built on the principle of good wishes, a combination of decoration and deep symbolic meaning in these pieces of jewelry.
Once, in the 15th century BCE, a man named Myrrh had extraordinary luck. 2 of his daughters were taken into the palace as junior wives of the king. Later, they visited their father. And of course, this event, daughters who had become noble court ladies, could not go unrecorded on the walls of his tomb in Thebes. Look at the constructions placed on top of the wigs on these ladies' heads. Golden temples and ponds from which golden papyrus rises. On each forehead is a small gazelle, the symbol of a junior wife of the king. She did not have the right to wear the uraeus, the sacred cobra, but these gazelles, often 2 gazelles, were attributes of junior royal ladies who very frequently bore the titles Kekeret Neshu and Tennis. Royal jewelry, red ribbons, golden necklaces, garments, all of it insanely beautiful. Describing it is pointless. Better to just look. As is well known, in the early 20th century, in a remote valley of the Theban necropolis called Wadi Kubanet el-Kirud, a local peasant woman accidentally discovered the tomb of 3 Syrian princesses, who became wives of Pharaoh Thutmose III in the 15th century BCE. The tomb was partially looted very quickly. The thieves were caught, but most of the items were bought by the Metropolitan Museum. Today, our conversation has had a lot about luxury, with many references to this American collection. Here's the usek, the grand broad collar of one of these princesses. They were, of course, fully Egyptianized and given Egyptian names, but what interests us now is not that. The contents of this tomb, even though disturbed, give us a chance to see the world of luxury that surrounded an Egyptian noble lady. A belt in the form of tilapia fish, the fish that gives birth to the sun, swimming through waters. Bracelets of carnelian with golden cats, incredible overlays for wigs made of gold and glass. The combination of blue glass and red carnelian creates an unbelievably decorative effect on top of the wig. Again, 15th century BCE. And these items from the burial of the royal concubine or similar allow us to see the toilet table of a junior queen or court lady, mirrors of gold and electrum, vessels of stone, faience, colored glass, and sometimes silver vessels, which were more expensive than gold. This is incredible luxury. A simpler woman might have had a set like this. A manicure knife, simple copper tweezers, a copper mirror, and on the left a tube for kohl, the eye paint used to line the eyes. Egyptians placed great importance on manicure. I can show you a completely astonishing close-up. This is the hand of Queen Ashayet, one of the wives of King Mentuhotep II, 21st century BCE. Friends, look at this image and you'll see a luxurious terracotta red manicure made from a mixture of cedar resin and red ochre. Exactly that muted, Not bright, not open shade that was the most popular for many centuries, even a millennium among Egyptian court ladies. Even though this mummy hand is absolutely unique, you can imagine how these refined, elegant hands with luxurious manicure looked in life. Hair was shaved. If on the right you see a mirror, on the left is a razor. Different parts of this razor were used to shave different areas of hair. The head, the skin of the face, because tanning was considered improper. Tan was associated with poverty, with peasants, with the lower classes of society. Understandable in many cultures. Here, of course, we have shaving, hair removal, wigs, all part of this wonderful world. And here's a beautiful girl depicted as the handle of this mirror. There are many, many such examples. Even the mirror case, though the mirror itself may not have survived, perhaps it was gold, is kept in the Cairo Museum. Look at what exquisite marquetry work, inlaid with ivory, black ebony, and other noble materials. In the center is this luxurious maiden who was, for the owner of this mirror, a symbol of beauty and good fortune. Naturally, there were games, satire, amusements. The famous game of hounds and jackals. The rules are known. A magnificent monument made of ivory with gaming pieces. So we can imagine court games and much, much more. And to close our journey through the world of ancient Egyptian women, let's end with something truly magnificent. This sculpture of a married couple, likely Conifer and Nefertiti, in quartzite, from the Berlin Museum. And let's finish with Egyptian poetry, verses that have echoed through millennia. My sister, my love, beyond compare, the fairest soul I've ever known. She rises like the morning star, like a New Year's joy, freshly sown. Her skin has the glow of sacred oils. Her eyes are deep. Her words are grace. With a slender neck and breast of light, perfection flows from her embrace. Her hair is deep as lapis stone. Her hands outshine the finest gold. Her fingers, like the lily's bud, are secrets waiting to unfold. With heavy hips and legs of myth, she walks the earth, a noble queen. My heart is stolen by her step, the purest grace I've ever seen. Every head turns as she passes by. Every heart begins to race. Blessed is the man she chooses now to hold the sun within her face. These words, written thousands of years ago, still capture the timeless beauty, grace, and power of Egyptian women, queens, priestesses, mothers, musicians, and lovers who shaped a civilization that continues to enchant us today. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through ancient Egypt, through its fragrances, its music, its luxury, its love, and its eternal elegance. If this touched you, if you'd like a deeper exploration of this museum or more stories like these, let me know in the comments. Should I make a longer full tour? Drop a yes or tell me what you want to see next. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell. There's so much more ancient magic to share. Until next time, may your days be filled with beauty and your nights with sweet dreams. Take care.